Okay, greetings math people. In this particular video, we're doing a TI Nspire 101 for beginners. So this is the TI Nspire graphing calculator. This one is CX2, and I'm by no means an expert with this calculator. I've started using this calculator last year, and last year was really my first time doing any type of operations for it. So last year I really learned, from scratch, doing stuff trial and error, based on what other calculators do, asking people, looking at YouTube videos. That's really all I did. So you may say, well, why are you doing an introductory video if you're not an expert? Because since I've just really learned how to use this calculator, most of the questions that a beginner would have, those are things that I've recently did. So I'm pretty familiar with the things that someone just being introduced to this calculator, the questions and the operations that they may need to perform. So I think I'm situated fairly nicely for such a video. And this video is targeted to the student taking either pre-calculus or calculus or algebra in either high school or college. And we're going to go over just the basic operations you would utilize in those type of courses. So without further ado, let's get right into it.
Specialize in science and mathing, original black men, busting thoughts that pierce your mental, the fierce, ripping your section, vocal toe-to-toe, impeccable, splitting your back, son, simple as addition and subtraction, black thought, the infinite relax one.
All right, so I'll be doing my demonstrations on the online calculator versus the handheld device. And when there's a discrepancy or a difference of how to do something on the online versus the handheld device, I will make commentary of how it's done on the handheld device. But it'd be better for the video to do this utilizing the online calculator. All right, so first of all, you turn this puppy on, and you're brought to this screen. Now, a couple things. So when you're brought to this screen, for the courses I outline, you pretty much just want to do calculations in graphing. And that's pretty the main things you'll be doing. And so when you turn it on, you have this option, calculate graph. From this scratch pad, you can go right to calculating graphing. My advice, my suggestion, my recommendation is to never use the scratch pad. So the scratch pad has some functionality issues. So it's best not to use the scratch pad. And what I like to do, again, for the courses outlined in the beginning of this video, is I like to always open up a calculating page and a graphing page. So what I like to do, instead of going to the scratch pad, I go to documents and I'll hit new and I'll hit add calculator. And then from this page, I'll hit this document button on the calculator and I'll go to insert and I'll insert graphs. And so I have two pages. I have a calculator page and a graphing page. And we'll look at some things later and why it's good to have both of these pages active. Now, you see I'm toggling between these two pages very easily, actually, but it's not done as easily on the handheld devices. It's quite easy to do on the online device because I'm just moving my mouse. So of course, any movement I do of my mouse on the handheld device, you would have to move your finger on this keypad here. And it can still work, but it won't be done as seamlessly, as quick as this. And in terms of toggling between, the calculating and graphing page, probably the easiest way to do it on a handheld device, if you see these icons here, they represent the next page. It's just hit control and then arrow, control, arrow. That's the quickest way, I believe, to toggle between pages when using the handheld device. All right, so let's talk about settings. For the most part, the default settings are going to be the settings that you need. You really don't have to change the default settings much. The only thing that you may need to change, depending on the course, is radians and degrees. Now, one of the good things about this calculator, compared to some of its predecessors, is right when it's on, you can see right there if you're in radians or in degrees. It's clear, it's obvious, And so what would happen in prior years with earlier calculators, students would do trig problems and they would feel they did everything right and wonder why did they get a wrong answer, either using the TI 83 or TI 84. And my first question to them is to hit mode and check, are you in the correct setting for your angle, whether that's radians or degrees, because on those calculators, there was no way to tell until you hit mode if you were in the correct setting. Of course, what I always would tell students is, if you're doing a problem where the calculator must be in degrees, before you do it, make sure it's in degrees and radians, vice versa. But the good thing about this one is you can clearly see, and to easily change the mode of the calculator, I'm talking radians and degrees, all you have to do is click on this. That's the easiest way to do it, in my opinion. It's not the only way. I'll show you in a second another way you can do it, but just click on it and it'll change. Now again, if I'm using a handheld device, I would move the cursor with my finger on this keypad until it went up here, and then I would just click. So that's how we change the settings from radians to degrees. An easy way to change the settings. Now other settings, and that's just to point out, again, I don't believe you'll ever really need to change these settings from the default settings. But if you click on this document button, and I'm going to go to settings number 7, and I think I clicked the wrong thing. So let me go back, document, settings. I'm clicking something too quick. This won't happen on the handheld device, but sometimes it'll happen on the online guide. So let me slow down. All right, settings, and then I'm going to go to document settings. And here are all your settings here. So this is another way I could have changed from radians to degrees. And you can change it from floating, the digits from floating a certain number to rounding to a certain number of decimal places with these fixed values. I think during the flow 6 is a good guy to leave it at. Exponential format, normal scientific engineering. Also, you have real or complex, calculation mode, auto or approximate. And basically what that does, auto, if it's a rational number, it'll typically express it as a fraction. Approximate, it'll give the decimal approximation or the decimal representation of the number. And there's some stuff about vector format and base. So again, the default settings, which is the settings that you see, will generally be best in most cases. Again, the main thing you would change from the default settings is simply to change the angle from radians to degrees. Now, some people may want to change the calculation mode. Say perhaps you're doing a multiple choice question or multiple choice assignment, and most of the problems, the answer choices are written in decimals. Then if you want decimal answers, it's best to have this calculation mode on approximate. So for instance, if I go 5 divided by 8, which is 0.625, and the answer choices are in decimals, it's going to give me 0.625. But if it was on auto, and I do something and I get 5 over 8, it's going to write it as 5 over 8. Now, even if you're on auto, and even if you get an answer that's a fraction, and you need the decimal representation, just on all calculators or all graphing calculators that you're familiar with, you can easily just convert it to a decimal. And how you do that on here is the menu button. So you go to menu and number. And so when you go to number, you'll say convert to decimal, and then you'll hit enter, and then it will convert it to a decimal. So you can do it that way as well. And just to briefly go through the options on menu, I won't talk about all of them, but I'll give a few comments on most of them. So if I go to menu, actions are different things I can do with variables and history and whatnot. Number are all the things you would think about: numbers converting to decimals, approximating to a fraction, least common multiple, greatest common divisor, all those things. Algebra, There again, I went too quick. So algebra, the main thing on the algebra side would be the numerical solve. Also solving system of equations. Again, the problem you keep seeing, and I just need to slow down a little bit, really occurs more on the online calculator than the handheld. And calculus, a numerical derivative, numerical integral, sum, product. I'm not going to talk too much about probability and statistics because, again, this is mainly aimed at people taking algebra, pre-cal, or calculus in high school or college. And then there's your menu for things dealing with vector. I'm not going to really look at finance or even function. All right. And anytime you're into something and you want to get out, say I hit menu, but maybe I didn't want to hit menu. Maybe I wanted to hit dock and I want to get out of menu. Just hit escape as many times as you need to. That's a general thing to know. All right. So we went through, the basic settings and how to get to the settings and whatnot. So let's look at a few operations. And one thing I like to look at is functions. So say for whatever reason, I have a function and I want to do certain things to the function. To me, particularly, if I'm an AP calculus student, there's some free response questions where a certain function, I'll have to do multiple things to it. I may have to take the derivative of the function, integrate the function, do a variety of things, evaluate the function, do a variety of things of the function, and maybe even analyze the graph of the function. And so to me, for those type of problems, it's best to type the function in the graph. And then if you have to recall it, you can go back to the calculating page. And so let me just type a quadratic function in here. Let's say x squared minus x minus 6. So you can see I chose just a parabola with two very easily identifiable x-intercepts, one at -2 and one at 3, because I look at how you find those zeros in a second. So say, this is my function. And by the way, so when you type a function in, it immediately graphs it. And now if you ever want to go back to where you type the function in or to add a new function, if you ever want to go back where you type the function in, just hit tab. And it will take you to the next function automatically. But if you want to go up to the previous function and edit, if you will, you can go up to that function. Now, also, since we're talking about graphs, when you do graphs, you also look at tables. So if you ever want to look at a table of a function, the quickest way to do that, the shortcut is to hit Control T. Now, there's other ways to do it, but the shortcut of doing it is to hit Control T. And if you want to take that table away, just hit Control T again. All right, so I got this function plugged in. So f1 of x is defined by this function. So let's say I want to take the derivative of this function at, say, x equals 5. And that derivative will be 9. So say I want to find the derivative of this function at 5. So I'll go back to the calculating page. And I'll do a numerical derivative. Now you saw on the menu, you had those calculus options, and that's one way of getting it. You also have this button here next to 9, which, brings up a lot of stuff. Fraction bar, exponent, square roots, all that good stuff, logs. So I like to use this button to access the derivative. So I'll use this button here. It's actually already selected. And I'm going to take the derivative with respect to x. And the function is f1 of x. So I'm going to type f1 of x. And so make sure you type f1 of x and, don't just type f1. And let's see, I want to find a derivative at x equals 5, I believe I said. So I'm going to put the little vertical bar and then I'm going to type x equals 5. And I believe we said that derivative should equal 9. And there we have 9. Then also, let's say I wanted to integrate this particular function. And so same button, this button next to 9 is kind of your magic menu button, kind of. And let's find a definite integral. And so there it is. And so let's select it and let's integrate from like 1 to 5. And I don't even know what this integral is going to be. So we're integrating f1 of x, f1 of x, and just 1 to 5. And of course, dx. And it gives us that particular value. Now, again, just speaking from myself, some of the mistakes I've made, when I would just type, f1, figure the function is defined, but you got to make sure you type f1 of x. And so you want to evaluate the function at a particular value. Let's say I want to find f1 of 0. Which of course would be, what was the last number? Was it -6? I think it was -6. So f1 of 0 will be -6. I would just type the function f1, and in the parentheses, I would hit 0. So that's one way of dealing with a function. Putting a function in the graph, because there's some graph things you may need to do with the function. And so I can do my graph things here, and I can do my calculating things here. Now let's talk about, the main graph things we would do with the courses that we spoke about. So a major thing we would do is find the zeros. Now here it's fairly obvious what the zeros are, and we could find them algebraically because this is a factorable quadratic. But let's pretend it wasn't that easy to know these zeros, and it's very important to find zeros a lot of cases. So in order to find these zeros, when you're on the graph, you want to hit menu. And menu, you want to analyze graph and just find 0. Now it's going to say lower bound. And what you're doing, you're moving this on the handheld device. You have your finger on this guy and you're moving this, and you're going to go, to the left of the point that you want. So let's say I want to get the -2 guy. So I'm going to go to the left of it. Then it's going to say upper bound. Then I'm going to go to the right of it, making sure I don't enclose the other 0. So I want to make sure it's just the 1 0 that I'm looking for. And then, of course, it gives you what the coordinates of that 0 are, -2, 0. So that's a very important thing to do. Also, let's just explore the menu options for graphing. You also can do things like zoom and window settings, where, particularly in a lot of times in calculus, you want to find a relative min or max from a graph, and it gives you a particular closed interval to look at. And so you will go to window settings and you adjust these values to match that particular window. All right, so that's the benefit of typing a function in the graphing part, where I can do graph things on the graph page, and then I can do calculating things on a calculating page. But let's say we have a function where, again, there's a variety of things that we're going to do to the function, but none of them deal with the graph. So I really don't have to type the function on the graphing page. So how can I define a function on the calculating page? All right, so define a function on the calculating page, and we can define it with any letter we like, but I'm going to call it f. So I'm going to define f of x. And notice there's no numbers, so the numbers are for the graphing page, so it would just be f of x on this page. And if you notice above this, I just know it from memory. Quite honestly, when I'm looking at this, I can't really see it. But what you have is a colon and an equal sign. And that is what is used to define a function. So I'm not going to give the same function I did on the graph. So I'll do some basic functions. Say 5x minus 1, 5x minus 1. All right, and it's defined that function. So again, just like before, all these things I did with f1 of x, I can do the same thing with f of x. For instance, I can find find f of 3, which would be 14. So just f parentheses 3 gives me 14. I want to integrate. Let's say I want to integrate this puppy from 0 to 4. So I integrate f of x from 0 to 4. And again, dx, etc. So all of the things that we did before on the graph page, if I don't really need to graph the function or do any type of graphical analysis on the function, I just need to do calculating things, then I can define the function here and do all the things that I need to do on a problem. All right, so that's pretty much all I wanted to look at on this introductory, this TI Nspire 101 for beginners. I hope I addressed most of the things that if you're new to the calculator that you need to know how to do, because these are the basic things that I needed to know how to do when I was first using the calculator. So we're going to go ahead and stop here. Hope you found some benefit, and we will see you next time.
Specialized in science and mathing, original black men, busting thoughts that pierce your mental, the fierce, ripping your section, vocal toe to toe, impeccable, splitting your back, son. Simple as addition and subtraction, black thought, the infinite relax one.